Hello. Thank you for coming to my talk on leveraging the little-known features of Artifact Hub. Does everybody in here already know what Artifact Hub is? Anybody? OK. So I'm going to cover just some of this real briefly. First, I'll say there are a lot of slides that I'm going to go through today. If you want the slides, you can go up to the scheduling system and get a copy, because I'm going to breeze past some of these. I use them kind of as a backdrop for talking, and I do move rather quickly. So Artifact Hub is a CNCF incubating project now. You can get the code up on GitHub, just like all of the other CNCF projects. You can run it anywhere. You can run it on your own, self-hosted, but people are probably most familiar with the centralized version, right? Where you go ahead and you get all these distributed artifacts from all over the internet. This is one place to search and find them. And of course, Artifact Hub, a little inception here, is actually up on Artifact Hub. You can find it, you can run it, you can install it, you can use it yourself. So if you want to have your own instance for, say, your own organization's artifacts to make those discoverable internally, you can absolutely do that. You can take it to your customers if you've got customers who want that. And it is something you can run yourself and find the details right up on Artifact Hub. That little inception helps us with that. So since the last time I talked about Artifact Hub, we do have one new thing that is a new type of artifact. Last fall at KubeCon, bootc joined the CNCF as a CNCF project. And so now bootable containers are a type of artifact that you can discover and work with in here alongside all of these other ones that are up there. And so that's another new artifact that's come in. The pace has slowed down a little bit because there's only so many projects that have artifacts in the CNCF and in this space. And so that's the new one. And here I'm going to go a little deeper. If you do have questions about some of the other stuff in here that's more higher level and basic, there was a talk that I gave at KubeCon North America last fall. You can get the video, you can get the slides, and all of that material over here. I'm going to go a little deeper into some of the other nuances, but a lot of that on the surface stuff is actually already available on the internet, video form. You can find it on our blog or at this link. So hi, I'm Matt Farina. I work at SUSE, primarily on Rancher. I've been working on Artifact Hub since before it was created. There was originally the Helm Hub and some other hubs, and they came together and morphed, and I worked on Helm Hub. I'm a Helm maintainer. I've been working on that for a long time. So I've kind of carried this along since it originally came together. And I don't do a lot of the regular work every day. You've got these two people, Sergio and Cynthia. And they do most of the work. They are the people you'll probably run into if you're filing an issue on GitHub or you want to contribute code, or they're who you're going to see in the contributing statistics. They do a wonderful job, and so every time I talk, they ask me to come up here. They don't want to come up here. They do a wonderful job, and I got to call them out because they are fantastic in everything that they develop. So the first thing that I want to touch on here is after you've got your basic stuff in there, how do we tell Artifact Hub more details about your stuff to make it more discoverable for the people who come there, right? You want to describe it. You want to inform people. You want to help them get to what they want. But you really, if you've got something you're putting in Artifact Hub, you probably want to showcase it as best as possible. So how can we go ahead and do that? Well, the first thing is Artifact Hub actually does some auto detection out of the box for as much as it can. It'll try to detect things like the name, description, version, and some other details if that metadata already exists. It's trying to be intelligent and as intelligent as it can, but only so much of that information is readily available to be figured out. So we need to go a little deeper. Now, what kind of things might you want to do to go deeper on? You might want to have some more control over the name, right? The way it's displayed, the way it's found through search. You might want to provide categories or keywords. Is this a security tool? Is this a backup tool? Is it something like that? What other metadata can you do to help Artifact Hub index and help people discover things? You might want to recommend other artifacts, right? If you've got 2 or 3 things that work well together, maybe you want to recommend those together. So when you're looking at one, it just pops up, hey, this other thing is there, right? You might want to share the company that actually produced this thing. If you're behind a business or an organization, or even a nonprofit, something like that, you might want to say, hey, we're the ones who created it. Let's put a name on it. You might want to set some install instructions. Some of the install instructions are very easy to figure out. Helm, it's easy. Helm install. There's certain commands you can do. Other artifacts, it's not as straightforward, and you want to control some of those. And of course, there's even more you want to do. So let's walk through how do we solve some of these problems and provide more context. There's a couple of places that we're going to get to where you can set some of this information. Some of the artifacts, Helm, Tecton, some of these have their own configuration files already, right? Like a chart.yaml file, things like that. And they have annotations. And so in the annotations, you can just specify this additional information. But not every kind of artifact has that information. And so in that case, there's actually an artifact hub package.yaml file where you can specify a whole bunch of information. And up on the screen, you're going to see a bunch of things here. And a number of these things can go into annotations as well for those that already have that in their configuration files. So you're going to see a little bit of a, depending on the artifact, where do you put this information? So let's walk through some of this stuff so that way you can see what we've got. Let's talk about the name, right? If you get something like Helm, you can set the name, right? I can say it's PostgreSQL. But sometimes you have a second name that goes along with it, like Postgres. This is a very easy example, but many other things have it. And you can actually specify what that alternative name is here. And that means when somebody goes to search for it, when they do something else, it shows up that way. Now, there's certain rules. You can see the note at the bottom here, right? One has to be a substring of the other. So somebody can't have, a foobar as something and try and grab cube as their namespace. It doesn't work. You actually have to have these things be substrings of each other, little checks and balances. But there is the ability to have an alternative name there that makes sense, that fits in. And you can specify it in something that has its own manifest, like I showed a moment ago, or in the Artifact Hub package, you can specify this information. Now, here's an interesting one, change logs, right? Software all over the place has change logs, or at least changes are tracked. Well, one of the things that you can have is you want to sometimes share that change log. And so here's an example of a changes category. Now, this shows you the Artifact Hub package YAML, what it looks like. And there's different kinds here, right? Added, changed, things like that. You can specify details, provide links for it. And this is what it looks like if you're using something that doesn't have its own manifest file, but you can provide that information. And if you're using something like Helm that has a manifest file, here's how you specify it as an annotation. Same kind of structure, or roughly the same, and you've got that information there. Now, this information is really useful because if I come over to Artifact Hub, right, if I go look in the right sidebar there, and somebody actually fills this information up, this lights up. And here's the Artifact Hub one. And if I go click on it, you can see the changelog right here. In fact, I can go look at previous versions and see what changed in each one. That metadata can pop out for people. So when they come to evaluate, they can see what's changing, what's going on. There's a really nice place to see it, to visualize it, to easily go back through it, because sometimes going back through change logs and commit messages isn't always the easiest. This provides a nice user experience for it. Now, one of the interesting things that I found about this is that Artifact Hub isn't the only place that uses some of this metadata. So there's another project out there called Update CLI. Has anybody heard of Update CLI in the room? So this is an open source project that is similar to something like Dependabot or RenovateBot, but it does updates of things that they don't do, right? And so this project integrates with things like Helm and charts. And so it's now reading the changelog annotations from Helm charts to be able to share that when it does its update work like those. And so other projects are starting to look at some of this metadata to say, how can we also use it to help with our other actions? And so this is another project that's able to use that metadata. Okay, so let's talk about custom install instructions here. Helm, it's an easy one. Some of the projects, it's very easy to tell you what the install command is. But this is a project here. This is KubeWarden. And KubeWarden is a policy engine. It's one of the several that are in the CNCF. And their policies happen to be in WebAssembly. And because they're in WebAssembly, you can do all the programming capability you can with any language that can compile to WebAssembly. And here's the install instructions, the custom install instructions from one of their artifacts to say, how do you install it, right? And here you can see this is Markdown that specifies how to do it. There's code snippets in, and they specify console as the type. And it's very easy. Here's how you go install this policy. Now, in the UI here, if you go over to that policy, you've discovered it, you want to know how to install it, you've got the install instructions. And they look nice. The code can be copied, right? The copy buttons are right there because it knows what to do. And this gives that ability to say, don't just install it or not have install instructions for something complicated. It lets you style and tell people and signal to them, here's what you can do to just make it simple. One of the things that I like is this idea of when somebody's going to go try something out, you want them to have fun in 5 minutes, right? Feel like they've accomplished something within 5 minutes. When you have nice install instructions like this, it lets them do that and see it in a way that the authors knew worked. So let's talk about the provider, right? This can get into simple marketing language, right? You want to say who provided something. Signal, my company did it. That is both for advertising, sometimes it's for trust and things like that. And you can signal it in the YAML, and again, it shows up in the sidebar to say who the provider is. And you'll see in each of these, there are 3 different examples. So you'll already see in the Artifact Hub ecosystem, we've got multiple organizations who are signaling, hey, we're the providers of this. It's nice for various reasons. Let's talk about recommendations. This is an interesting one here. So you've got one chart, right, or one artifact, and you want to go recommend other artifacts that go along with it. Maybe you've got an application you want to install that's an operator, and you want to say, you know what, if you're going to use this operator, you might consider these policies. And they may be even different policies for different policy engines, depending on what your end user is using. Because in the Kubernetes space, we know there's a ton of flexibility of what you can piece together with all these Lego blocks. And some of them, you only need one out of a set because there's things that occupy the same space. And so here, you've got something that is recommending Cert Manager. And you can see the 2 different style of annotations depending on, or YAML, depending on what project you're doing. And then what happens is this new section pops up when that's there. And it tells you, hey, there's a recommendation. Pops up right at the top and says, hey, there's a recommendation. And this is different from what shows up lower down on the sidebar for related things, because that's what, using your metadata and everything else, Artifact Hub tries to piece together to recommend. This is your explicit recommendations. Those go up front. So let's talk about sometimes fun and sometimes confusing thing, signing artifacts, right? You see this sometimes in the security environments, things like that. Sometimes it's a pain when signing doesn't work. So let's talk about signing for a minute. I asked Gemini, what is software provenance? And signing gets into that. And you can see that it talks about, knowing where something comes from, how it was built, how it was put together. And in this case, we're very interested in how it wasn't built, right? And that's really where, when you talk about provenance, signing can help you with, to know how it was built. Is it what I wanted? Is it what I needed? And this is an important thing in the software space with all kinds of malware going around, with people trying to take something and say, hey, I'm going to just alter this a little bit and inject something in that does something malicious. You might get something from a corporate vendor, you think it's from them, and then it's really not. And that's where signing can help you, because signing is really about authenticity and integrity, right? Is this actually the thing I got from who I got it from? Because if somebody in the middle changes it, right? They take it out, they put it into your private registry for your company. Is it still that same thing that got moved, or did it get altered? Do I still trust that it came from the vendor? Did it still come from the right place? And knowing this is authentically the thing and its integrity hasn't been messed with can be very important for security. And that's where signing comes in. Now, what does this have to do with Artifact Hub? If you go to Artifact Hub, you're actually going to see one of these many things there has to do with, is it signed? And if you go to this, here's a Helm chart, and this is from GitLab. They sign their charts, and it'll tell you that it's signed there. And you can see, okay, GitLab, the organization, is signing it. That means later on, if I grab this thing and I can go check it, I've got a way to validate it. Now, this is because Helm has provenance files. It is just like your chart. It's got the same name, except it ends in .prov. Helm repositories know what to do with this, and OCI registries, it's easy to put them in there. Helm knows how to work with this. And the only kind of interesting part of this is this was put together years ago, so it uses this fun thing called PGP for signing. It was before cosign or any of the other stuff, but it does use PGP. And so Artifact Hub in your chart.yaml, you can specify an annotation, so Artifact Hub knows what's my fingerprint, where's the key, so it knows what to do for validation. This is also a nice way to signal to any organization that's going to pull it down, where do you get the key to validate it later? But you'll find that Helm charts aren't the only thing that can be signed. There's a bunch of artifacts out there that can be signed. And here's an example. This is, again, KubeWarden. And KubeWarden is signed with cosign. It was created more recently, and so they leveraged cosign for their signing and verification. And it'll tell you, it's signed with cosign. And Artifact Hub can detect that and display it. And so it shows you how to go ahead, if something's signed and how you can go validate it. And in this case, not everything can be signed, of course, right? So here's something that can't be signed. And if it can't be signed, it's going to tell you, it's not that it's not here. This type of artifact doesn't have a known signature method that's being passed around for signing and verification. So let's talk about some linting and some learning, right? You've got all of this metadata out there, and you want to go ahead and see, does my, what is there that I can add to my artifact, to my thing that I'm working on? Or maybe you want to verify that everything is being put in there that I think is. So Artifact Hub actually has a CLI that can go along. That's a good developer tool that you can use. The CLI, you can find it in the docs. You can find the detail, which is artifacthub.io/docs is where you're going to find the documentation at. And if you scroll down on the left side, you'll find there's a CLI. Now, the CLI has some simple installation. If you're on Mac, you can install it with Brew. If you're on Windows, you can install it with Scoop. If you're on Linux, you can download the binary and put it in the right place. We don't have a Linux install for package managers right now. Most development tends to be in Mac and Windows, and that's where the easy install is. And so if you bring this up, you're going to see that the commands for it, the primary command that's in it right now is linting. And that's where it can look at it, lint the configuration, provide feedback. So let's go ahead and we'll use Helm to just create a dummy, use Helm create to create a chart, and just out of the box, see what's in there. And what it's going to do is it's going to show you all of these things that it does or does not find, right? And this may be a little small for you to read because it's a long list, but it actually goes through a bunch of the things that I talked about and things that I didn't. And it tells you what's there and what isn't. And if you want details on what's not there and where you can learn more, artifacthub.io/docs will actually give you the details on this and the kinds of information you can put in. So if you're doing a chart or you're doing a KubeWarden policy, you can go to that one there, navigate to it, and then find out exactly the metadata that you can put in, the structure and how it all works. And this will validate that it's in the right structure. It'll validate that everything's there and works. So it tells you it's not there, and it validates that it can read it and work with it. And this here is a Helm chart, but this is small, and I'm sure you all can't read it very well, but this is for policy. And it's looking at the different data structure for the different thing and fills it in. So it's policy aware, right? Or it's type aware. Now you have to specify the kind because it can't always tell what it is from the kind, especially since you get artifact hub-package.yaml. How does it know exactly which artifacts it's scanning there? You have to specify with a kind, but it does give you the ability to do this. And here I'm just showing examples of a single artifact. If you actually have a directory with a bunch of artifacts in it and a bunch of these, or a subdirectory structure, it can look over all of them and provide you a readout on all of them. So it can look at a whole chart repository and provide you the feedback for all of them. All right, so let's switch gears from how do you specify your information to make it easier for Artifact Hub, to how do you use some of those other things in Artifact Hub that are there. And one of them is actually taking information in Artifact Hub and embedding it elsewhere to share around, right? If I have something that I found in Artifact Hub that I want to share, I don't want to go update that other website all the time. Every time a new Artifact Hub gets pushed out, or an artifact on Artifact Hub gets pushed out, I want it to automatically update. And so we have ways of taking some of that information that you're going to find on Artifact Hub and embedding it elsewhere on the internet. And so I'll give you two examples. The first is you can take an artifact itself, you can go to it, and the three dots in the top right, you can actually choose an embed widget. Now that embed widget will take something about Artifact Hub and let you embed it. So here, you can specify some configuration, then you get the HTML, you can embed that into a website, say in a sidebar or something like that, and this will stay up to date. When new artifacts get pushed, new versions, some changes in language, things like that, this will be updated any place it's embedded. So it gives you that ability to embed details about an artifact in other places to advertise it, market it, things of that nature. But this isn't the only place you can do it. Another thing you can do is search queries. So I can take a search query, right? And here I just did a basic search query. And you got the dots up there. You can embed the results. And it's got the same kind of features where you can go ahead and choose certain things. Is it light mode, dark mode, some characteristics about it. And you can take a search results and embed that somewhere else on a site. You can do things, you can filter it down to say just my organization, just this type of thing. There's all kinds of characteristics from search you can do. And you can take that, embed it, and make it viewable elsewhere. And of course, it will reproduce that query. So as it changes, the content will be updated as well and in the places it's embedded. So let's talk about webhooks, because sometimes you want to do integrations. And sometimes it's not even your own artifacts you want to integrate with, right? There's all these artifacts. There's thousands and thousands of artifacts up there, many revisions on those. Sometimes you want to do stuff with them if you're using those artifacts, right? And webhooks are a great way to pass events around the internet. So Artifact Hub does support webhooks. And in this case, you'll have to be signed in. And then you go to your control panel. And then in the control panel, you go to settings. Pretty straightforward. And then there's a webhook section. And that webhook section, you're going to get into webhooks. Now, if you go here, in this case, it was blank, and then you click on Add. And what you get here is the ability to start filling in the details about webhooks, right? You have something that's going to receive it. You want Artifact Hub to send something out. So you've got things like a name, a description. You've got a secret, because one of the things you're going to want is when your receiver receives a webhook, you don't want just anything to do it. You want a shared secret on both sides. So you can, security, reject garbage that some internet bot may be scraping and just sending out there. You want a way to reject it. Know what's real, know what's not. You can look at certificates, sites, domains. So many things can be faked. Here's a place to have a shared secret. And so you can have that shared secret, and you specify it. Now, you can also then say, is this for new releases or just security alerts? And then you select your artifacts you want. And you select the artifacts, you fill in everything else, and then you can even get into your payload. You've got a default payload, which is going to be cloud events based, or you can do a custom payload. And with that custom payload, it can be any type. It uses Go templating, and you can specify the templating structure you want for that payload. So you've got a webhook, shared secret, payload that you can pass out, and now when there's updates to something for security or something else, you can now have automation on the other end that receives that and acts on it. And this is all powered by Artifact Hub receiving all these distributed things. It's doing stuff based on those events. Might as well let you all do stuff based on those events as well. So subscriptions. Let's talk about subscriptions for a second. We talked about webhooks and pushing things out and automation and APIs. That's great. Sometimes we just need a simpler way of doing things, right? Subscriptions. We subscribe to email things all the time, sometimes too many things, right? And then we go back into our email and go, what was this thing? I'm going to go unsubscribe from it. I do far too much of that. But subscriptions are something else that Artifact Hub supports if you want something that's less API-driven. And you can see if you go to an artifact up here, and here we're looking at the SIG Store Helm plugin. So for those of you who laughed at PGP being the way Helm does signing or giggled about that, there's actually SIG Store signing and verification as a Helm plugin as well for those who want it. Because Helm did things before SIG Store existed, and so it's become a plugin to the ecosystem to do those things. And here, you can go ahead and subscribe to it. You can subscribe to security alerts or new releases. And as soon as you click that ball, if you're logged in, it signs you up. And you'll get emails to that whenever there's a new update for whatever category you picked here. You'll get it in your email. You'll know. You'll be notified. I particularly like at least the security ones because I don't always do every new patch release especially for things that come out all the time. But I definitely want to pay attention to all the security releases for everything that I use because you want to know when there's a security fix. And of course, in settings, next to webhooks, there's an area to manage your subscriptions where you can either add something or you can go ahead and toggle. Maybe you had something where you're getting new releases and you're like, this is too much, I want to change it. I can go toggle it, or I can remove it. It's very straightforward in settings. Should all be familiar to folks. So let's talk about the API. I talked a little bit about webhooks and pushing things out, and we talk a lot about displaying this information. Most of what you see on Artifact Hub, the website, you can actually get to through the API. And if you go to the doc site, you'll actually find you can also get to the API site. This should look familiar for people who work with APIs a lot. You can scroll through and actually see there's an API for just about everything you want to do. You can get to the artifacts, metadata, all of those things. Now, one of the things you're going to have to do if you want to work with the API is do API keys, and you're going to have to authorize it. And the reason for that is obviously we don't want things out there that we don't know about completely abusing the API, beating up, and we have to control for that. If somebody's hitting the API far too much, you can abuse that. And there are people out there who will do that. So we do things like keys and authentication. And that's where you need to authorize it. And you can actually play with it once you have the authorization keys right in the website. But again, in your settings, you'll have API keys alongside subscriptions and webhooks. And it's pretty straightforward. You just add a name, and you get a key. Now, this key is invalid, so I put it up there, I deleted it, it's not good, but there's an example. Here's the information you get for your API tooling to call it, and you get a key. And that key will be valid for as long as it's needed, but you can come back later and you can delete it if there's a problem, you can rotate it, those kinds of things. And then, of course, you can use that to authenticate to the API. You can do it through the website to see what that's like, to test it. And use it in your own applications. And so lots of tools out there actually use the API to do interesting forms of integration, but a lot of it isn't public. So let's talk about an interesting thing here, or at least I think it's interesting for anybody who's got a complicated organization. So in Artifact Hub, a lot of times you might think one person put something up, but if you work for a company or another CNCF project, you might have complicated organizational structure, right? You see this if you use GitHub. You've got owners, you've got maintainers, you've got people with read access, with write access. When you add somebody in Artifact Hub to an organization, everybody's essentially an owner. But a lot of times you don't want to do that. You want to give people certain specific permissions. And out of the box, you're probably going to see, well, everybody's got one level. It turns out you can do more than that. There's actually a way to handle different levels of authorization so people can just do certain things on Artifact Hub. But it's more complicated and more flexible than you're going to see in most other systems. So if you come in and you go to an organization, so you go into settings, there's the context, or the control panel context. And that's going to let you do for yourself or any organizations you're a part of. You go to an organization you're a part of, you're a member on, and you go into, and you can see, I switched to the Helm organization here. Oh, got things in a lot of order here. You're actually going to see there's authorization. I jumped to the docs here. And one of the things you're going to see in the docs here is you can see policies written in Rego. So that way you can use the same kinds of policies as OPA to say what people can do. So if I go back to that authorization page and settings for a project or for an organization, not a person, you'll see authorization. And you can come in here and turn on policies, fine-grained access control. And with that, you can choose an out-of-the-box policy, or you can create your own. And you can control exactly how you want things to be on your organization. And so with different organizations wanting a little bit different structure and not wanting such fine-grained locked in, this gives you flexibility, but it also gives you some quick, easy things out of the box too, if you want some more complicated structure. And with that, Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, can you come up to the microphone? Thank you.
The linting, can you have a configuration file to say you must have these fields because that's what we want to provide, or like and fail if your packages don't have them?
I'm sorry, what was that? In the
The artifact hub lint, it went through and gave you results, but can you do like a pass-fail check on, say, I want certain fields to always be enabled, and if you don't provide that, like it's required by Artifact Hub, but I might have a
I
different.
don't think it does right now, but that sounds like a great contribution. So Artifact is open. So what I'll say is, I don't think that's a feature right now, but I like the idea. And when I was actually putting this together, it crossed my mind. And I would say there's two routes to it. One, if somebody wants to file an issue for it, Sergio, I imagine, will jump on that. They tend to jump on these things pretty well. So if you file an issue with a request and detail out what you're looking for, that's one way, because issues files are great ways to get things moving and recorded for other people. And this is open source, so if somebody wants to jump in and try to contribute it, we are more than happy to help you with that as well. So I like the idea, though. Are there any other questions?
I wanted to say that I think the choice of using cloud events to report that webhook payload, it looks awesome. Do you have the schema published as well of what the payload contents is?
If you actually scroll down further in that, when you go into the UI,
Awesome.
I think it's in there.
Okay, great.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so you've been talking about org authorization, and authorization requires a user account. Does Artifact Hub support OpenID?
No, it does not. There are a handful of providers. You can see you can log in with a few of them up front when you go to create an account or log in. So there are a couple of outside sources that it does, but it's not flexible to do any old one right now. It does major ones like GitHub, things like that. So it will support that. For people who want to run it on their own, that sounds like a wonderful idea. And so if somebody wants to come contribute that or to file an issue on it, we are more than happy to talk about that. Are there any other questions? Thank you all for coming to my talk. Have a wonderful rest of your time here.